Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season 3 premiere of Barry. Great season premiere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So I was curious about what the time frame was, because the way things were kind of playing out, I almost felt like, oh, is this on like a couple of days after everything went down? It's like, no, it seems like it's roughly been 6 months, because it was like a 2-year period in between seasons, so I guess I kind of lucked out at starting the show when I did, but tangents and all that aside, I thought it was kind of interesting, like Barry immediately going back to work after everything went down, but I guess that's why, because everything else in his life upheavaled, because the sad thing is, we learned, pretty quickly the state, we learned the state of things, that Gene ended up shutting down the class, and so everything Barry's ever done has been all for that, and it kind of, it kind of all fell apart because his life he was building for himself, it kind of all fell apart because of Fuchs. And I mean, obviously a combination of that plus his own actions led to all of that. But he's kind of like purposeless now. So we see him kind of, and he talks about it in the episode that he's kind of taking like amateurish jobs. So he's dealing with a guy who's like, yo, I want you to kill this guy Jeff because he's sleeping with my wife. And it's like, okay, I want you to get your tools because I want to cut his eyelids off. I want to make him suffer. And then it's like, okay, I don't want you to kill Jeff. He's like, I don't want you to do it. He's like, oh, so you want me to just shoot him and leave him in the grave? He's like, no, I don't want, I'm calling all this off. It's like, that's so interesting. You went from 0 to 60 back to pumping your brakes. I thought that was pretty interesting. It's kind of an interesting time to decide to pump your brakes too, after you've already got the guy digging a hole. Barry's like, all right, you want me to shoot him? You're like, no, I want him to suffer. And now you're like, no, I want to call the whole thing off. I mean, you're entitled to change your mind, but it just seemed like super late in the game to decide to change your mind. And he's like, yeah, like the guy asked for forgiveness, so I'm going to forgive him. Barry ends up killing both of them because he's internalizing a lot. For one, he's not going to, he's still hell-bent on Fuchs because it's like, right, you screwed everything up my life, I hate you. But also he's internalizing like, right, this all came about because of my own actions. I'm the one that killed Janice, and that's what snowballed into this whole thing. Like from the very beginning, my decision to try and keep the life I built for myself as Barry Block. Yeah, so it's it. That's why his line. That's why the episode's like, oh, forgiving Jeff. But he's like, I thought that was going to be like, the fact is that's the title of the episode. I thought like, okay, so that's going to be an entire. It's like, no, it's more so the lesson of the episode because that's the question. Like, who's Jeff in this situation? You would think it'd be Fuchs, but I think more so than anything, Barry's the Fuchs in the situation because he's like, you can't forgive Jeff. Maybe in Barry's mind, he thinks Fuchs is the Jeff, but maybe in actuality, he's the Jeff in the situation, it seems like, so. But regardless, it seems like Barry probably hasn't really, well, he had that one big audition last season, but obviously to get to Gene when Fuchs was doing his whole thing, Barry just kind of abandoned it. We don't know where things kind of went from there, but it seems like, oh, well, because Sally brings up an audition stuff, but I guess that's just an excuse to make it seem like, oh, he's a working actor or something like that. It seems like Barry just kind of gave up, understandably so, after everything he did. And him and Sally are in this interesting and weird place. She's like, yeah, so like if I say you could stay, that doesn't actually mean to stay. Bring flowers, but not yellow flowers. Love you, bye. And so she's running her own. I don't know whether she's actually like it run. Well, because I'm assuming, like, based on, like, the binder she's looking at, like, she's kind of the lead of the show. I was about to say, I don't know what her role is, because it does seem like, oh, it might just be because she has top billing as, like, the, like, lead actress or something that she kind of got that treatment. We saw kind of later on in the episode. Either that, or it's just a circumstance that they're like, no, she is, like, very hands-on, because this is kind of her story. Obviously, they're twisting it for the sake of, I mean, I don't think she's, yeah, because I think it's like, yeah, it's like taking the story and building upon it, kind of like her agent was kind of talking about, agent/manager, she was talking about last season, and I think they're just kind of acting upon that now, so, and I love that they brought it to someone who I'm assuming is kind of like a top executive, and she's just kind of like, oh yeah, she references something, she's like, oh yeah, that line, this isn't just a cafe or something like that. And Sally's like, what? And she's like, oh, that was a different show. She's just so like, it's like, oh, like, did the mother and daughter, they live together? It's like, yes. It's like, and she asked one of the people, she's like, did you live with your mom when you were in high school? She's like, yes, I did. And then the lady's like, yeah, me too. And I'm like, that lady just seems kind of out of it. I think she's supposed to be maybe like that very eccentric executive or something like that. It also seems like Natalie might be Sally's assistant or something, because it's probably like after Gene shut down the school, like everyone probably had to scatter to find like other jobs and stuff like that, or maybe other people got opportunities. We don't know. It seems like Sally's the one, from what we've seen so far, it seems like she's the one doing the best out of anyone in the class, because she's got this whole show thing that's kind of happening based around a version of her story, not like the, So I had brought that up in the season 8 finale, not season 8, but in episode 8 of last season, being, how was Sally going to swing this situation? So we've only got this introduction to it, so we haven't really gotten to the heart of it yet, but it seems like, it's like, things are kind of looking up for her. I think it's kind of everything she wanted. Granted, she got there by what she considers like a lie, because it's like, this wasn't my truth, and now I've gotten so much attention, and now all these things are happening because of that. It kind of snowballed. So I thought that was kind of an interesting development on that front. But like I said, it seems like Natalie might be her assistant, and she never always treated Natalie the best. Like, even from the very beginning, like, the way, like, sometimes she'd cut Natalie off and stuff like that, but now she's like, oh, like, when we're in meetings, how about, like, you don't talk? And it's just like, okay. And Natalie's just kind of just taking it, just like, oh, okay. And just like, yeah, she's like, okay, you do that thing when you decide something. Oh, thank you so much. It's just kind of like, yeah, like, your only purpose is to kind of serve me. And so it seems like that's kind of what Natalie's gotten relegated to. Once again, like, sadly, Natalie kind of almost filled that role to some extent, even in the first 2 seasons, too, just because it's like, I feel like she never really had her moment, even more so now, like, it's kind of like Sally's having her moment, and Natalie's just kind of, like, caught in a wave of it, essentially. So we'll have to wait to see how things kind of go from there. But other elements to this episode, we found out Fuchs is in Chechnya, because it seems like Hank's kept him there till things kind of blow over in LA, which I think is interesting, because when the police show up, May in particular, coming to question Hank about, the monastery and stuff like that, and also Janice's death, at first Hank is like, oh, I have no idea, like, the monastery, like, how could I have been there? No one survived. Like, how'd you know that if you weren't there? The Citizen app? But Hank is like, all right, fine, I'm gonna tell you the truth. That guy right there, and points to Fuchs, he's known as the Raven. The fact is, he's the guy that they bring in to kind of, like, fix stuff and make, stuff go away. So, saying that he probably killed everyone at the monastery. Which I love later on when he's just like, talking to Batir over the phone, being like, the police, they bought it hook, line, and sinker of the Raven. You should have heard them. They were almost like, oh my god, the Raven is like, which obviously Hank is hyperbolizing, because they were like, all right, stop jerking us around, Hank. Like, that Raven is just BS and stuff like that. He's like, oh yeah, like, it's such a scary name. You should, like, I think he was like, you should look it up or something, like Raven, and whatever the case may be. Which I thought was interesting, because I'm like, why not just sell Barry out? You're throwing Fuchs under the bus, but why not Barry? Is it because you're like, right, we don't want to be in a situation? I mean, Barry literally killed a monastery full of people, like, maybe he's like, we don't want to take the chance that Barry might snap and come after us again, so they're just throwing Fuchs under the bus, which once again is interesting considering you're kind of protecting him in Chechnya, but that's also probably till they decide what they're going to do. But I guess it's also because maybe, like, Fuchs is the one that has to take the fall, because this is kind of all his fault. It's like, if he had never been in a monastery, Barry wouldn't have, like, literally went on his killing spree in the monastery, so maybe that's their justification. I just think that's interesting, especially because Barry goes to Hank later on. He's like, yo, I need a job, I need work, I'm, like, struggling here, which Hank is like, you literally framed us because of the pen. I didn't realize, because I knew Barry had reached into the whole trunk of Janice. It didn't click in my head, like, oh no, he purposely put that there to frame Hank. I took that as like I said at the time, I thought he was trying to put his prints everywhere, just so that if they saw his prints on the body or just all around. I mean, Barry's a professional, so he probably wore gloves and stuff like that. But I thought that's what the justification was going to be like. Oh, in case you find my prints there, I'm not actually, that's because I was here, blah, 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 blah. But I didn't realize Because if you go retrospect, like I said, when he's leaning in, like I said, I thought that's when he was putting down the prints. It's like, no, he was putting down the pen, and he framed Hank in them. Which is sad, considering Hank has given you a chance over and over again. It's like, once again, you're supposed to be best friends, and you screwed him over. Hank doesn't appreciate that. It's like, yeah, you framed me. It's like, how about you leave Barry, and try not to frame me on your way out? Because, you know, him and Cristobal are now a thing, which is really sweet. And I love the whole conversation about, like, because Barry kind of gets brought up. He's like, oh, don't bring up Barry. You know, I lost all my buddies. And it's like, Hank's like, I lost a lot of buddies too. He's like, yeah, but you lost most of your buddies. You still got some. I lost all my buddies. So let's not talk about Barry, because the business needs to be back, built back up, because everything's in shambles now because of what Barry did. There's so low grade. There's only, other than Hank, there's like only 3 other people involved with the operation. It's the 2 guys that got Fuchs out before Barry went on his massacre, and Batir. I think they're the only ones that are here. And I love that when Hank is like, Hank, if you don't come back, we don't hear from you in 2 hours, well, I'll take cyanide pills. And one of the guys is like, wait, what? Wait, what? And he's like, I didn't sign up for that. Why do I have to kill myself for this? Just, you know, I guess it's the classic thing of like, right, to make sure no one ends up being forced to talk, we'll kill ourselves. So that's extreme. But yeah, Barry's in a really bad place, because when he goes to visit Sally on set, he starts seeing that a bullet in her head, and the bullet went in her head, and her head's bleeding, and it's just, I'm curious if that's supposed to be signifying, I mean, I'm sure it's representative of the massacre he went on in the monastery, but specifically the last dude he killed, because it was just like, right, it's just a representation of his rage. He'd given into it, and he killed a lot of people that didn't deserve to die. Once again, he didn't just kill Esther's people, he killed, and Cristobal's people, he also killed, he also ended up killing Hank's people too, so understandable. Also another level of why Hank is pissed at him, and that's, like I said, Hank is giving him chance over and over again. It's like, this time, there's kind of no coming back in that regard. And so, that's why he's trying to find some work to keep himself distracted. Because other than that, he has nothing. He doesn't have acting. He needs something to keep going. And the sad thing, too, is, so we got to clear an answer. Because I was still, like, unsure about the whole... Once again, Gene knew, but I was like, well, he knows Barry is Barry Block, so I was almost wondering, like, would he remember that Barry's last name is actually Barry Berkman, and would he... But it's like, no, he made it pretty clear. Because I'm so stupid, because it's like, right, him and Fuchs had a whole conversation in episode 7 of last season about, like, oh yeah, his name is Berkman. I don't know why I said all that in the season 2 finale. It's like, in retrospect, I'm like, no, I'm being stupid. So... Gene's been sitting on this for a while, and I guess he told the cops about Barry, but it's like, yeah, because it's like, oh, they pointed out that, yeah, this is Fuchs, he's the one that, but they're like, yeah, this guy's known as the Raven, we think he's the one that killed Janice, but then it's like, oh yeah, this guy, he's connected to Barry, and I guess Gene had given them Barry's name before, but the detectives are like, yeah, we looked into Barry, he's clean, he has no connection to this. They're like, we get it, like, you out of anyone would know better than, well, anyone about being falsely accused about something, but Gene won't let that go. To the point he gets out a gun that I guess he got from Rip Torn. Once again, R.I.P. Rip. Interesting timing too, because I just happened to look up something about Rip Torn today. I forgot, somebody made reference to something that was connected to one of his... Oh, God. I'm terrible with names, because it was an actress I wasn't that familiar with that I just happened to stumble across, and it's like her and Rip had a daughter together, and who's also an actress. And I don't, like I said, it was just something that, like, it was just interesting timing. And he says goodbye to his grandson, which it seems like after everything went down, him and Leo got into a better place, even to the point now it's like, right, you're around your grandson, you're saying goodbye to him, just hoping that everything's going to be okay. He brings Barry in, and he's like, yo, Barry, I want to meet at the acting class, need help packing up some stuff. And Barry goes, and Gene's planning on, he's like, right, you got 2 choices, because I know that you're the one that killed Janice, so you have 2 choices, turn yourself into the cops or fucking die. And then Gene messed up, and the whole chamber and the bullets fell out the gun. You're like, oh boy, Gene, oh, Gene. And then Barry's like, I'm sorry. And you're like, okay. And he didn't do it then and there, but he takes Gene out to Des. And Gene's like, all right, please, I'll forgive you. Just like, come on, like, we can work this out. We can put this up. It's like water under the bridge. And obviously he's like, I'll forgive you. And Barry's like, forgiveness isn't that easily, forgiveness has to be earned. Because that was something that Hank had said to him. And he's like, well, then fucking earn it, Barry. And Barry's like, oh, I have an idea. I know how to fix this. Because, obviously Gene's begging for his life. But he's like, oh, I know how to fix this. Get back in the trunk. I actually have no idea how Barry plans on fixing it. He's like, I'll do something that will make you forgive me. I'm like, what does that mean? How's that going? Like, is it going to be the Fuchs situation? Like, is it by still tracking down and killing Fuchs? Because it's like, right, he's the reason why all this went down. It's all his fault. So if he hadn't made me into the killer, Barry might take it all the way back there. To be fair, once again, last season tackled the fact is that Barry's had this in him for a while, and he just... Fuchs just like found an outlet for it, what was kind of potentially already there. So I'm curious to see what that ends up being. Interesting and great way to start off the season. I'm really curious to see where things kind of go, because this is probably the most like, even with the Janice thing going from season 1 to season 2 was pretty rough, but like these circumstances starting the season off like this definitely going to be a rough, interesting season. I am curious, like I said, to see if we, I don't know if I brought that up earlier. I'm curious to see if we'll get see where the rest of the class went. Once again, we see where Sally and Natalie are, but what about Sasha? What about Nick? What about Jermaine? Like, are we going to get any updates about them this season and what they're up to? Obviously, I've gotten to season 3 late, so there are currently 3 episodes out. So 2 more episodes I can jump into this after. So I'm excited to see where episode 2 and then eventually episode 3 takes us. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.